Uganda.
Now, over 5,000 delegates are in Nairobi for the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly at the UNEP headquarters. The meeting has seen negotiators and environment actors engage on how to fight emissions and other factors that continue to choke the world. My colleague Fatia Mohamed Noor had a sit-down with Liang Su, the United Nations Under Secretary and an Associate Administrator, United Nations Development Program. I leave you with this conversation. My name is Dennis Aseto. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Can you provide an overview of UNDP's roles and contributions to the United Nations Environment Assembly?
Thank you very much, really, for this opportunity. UNDP has been a long-standing partner of UNEP, for many, many years. And our role, compared to UNEP, is very different in the sense that UNEP is a norm-setting organization, right, in the UN on anything environment. And the UNEA is the largest gathering of governments on environmental issues globally. Whereas the UNDP is a field-based organization helping our country governments to get things done, right? So there's an important complementarity between what UNEP is about and what UNDP is about. And we are really here to understand the discussions that are really have important implications on environmental issues globally, and then understand the priorities and make better connections between the global priorities, the decisions of governments, and what we do at country level day in and day out.
What are the most pressing environmental issues that UNDP, or rather UNEA, should prioritize, and how is UNDP working to address them?
The narrative for global environmental challenges, that has been used very widely is this triple, crisis, right? Climate, biodiversity loss, and also pollution, right? So this has really been the sort of organizing framework for the UNEA, and a lot of discussions around this. And there are a set of international conventions, right, agreements that address this, sort of a triple crisis, right, environmental crisis. You have a climate, convention. You have a biodiversity convention. You have now a global biodiversity framework, right? You also have a desertification, anti-desertification convention, right? You also have the plastics conventions negotiation that is taking place, right? So all these issues, will be discussed at the UNEA. So the issues related to, for example, circular economy, right? Related to, for example, pollution, ocean management, plastics, a lot of issues. So, around this triple crisis will be the focus of this UNEA.
Right. How does UNDP ensure that environmental sustainability is integrated into the broader development efforts and policies, both at the national and the global level?
And for UNDP, as I mentioned earlier, right, we are part of the UN system, right? And our value added, I think, is really to work with our governments to, get the international commitments, right, met, right, and through our collaboration at country office level. And give you a couple of examples. For example, when it comes to climate action, right, which is a major focus of UNEA, and there's also the UNFCCC, right, International Convention, right, and the governments need to implement. What is the core issue today? The core issue is that we needed to achieve a 1.5 degree world, right? The temperature increase from pre-industrial period cannot exceed 1.5 degrees. What is the instrument? It is the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the UNFCCC, right? And the key instrument here is the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, right? During the initial phase of the NDC, when the Paris Agreement was agreed, the collective contributions, commitments of governments, allowed us to see a 3.5 degree world. That is, if everybody does what they promised, right? Yeah. The world will still see a 3.5 degree temperature increase, which is obviously not sustainable. So during the COP26, Glasgow COP, when the second generation of NDC was submitted, right? And then the collective commitments will result in a 2.5 degree world. So it's a major progress, but it's still not enough, right? And 2024, 2025 is a time when countries will prepare the third generation of NDCs. And this time we must achieve a 1.5 degree world, right? So the discussion at the UNEA will clearly provide the momentum, right, for countries to achieve that goal. Now, UNDP's role is to work with governments. We are working with more than 120 countries, 70% of developing countries, right, to support their work to have a new generations of NDC that will help us to achieve 1.5 degrees. So this is what we do on climate. I can also give you an example on biodiversity if we have time later. So,
you can give me an example.
On biodiversity, climate, desertification, right? And also issues of pollution, circular economy, they're all linked, right? These are linked. So we need to use, these conventions to have an integrated approach to achieve our goal of, dealing with the triple, climate, biodiversity loss, and the pollution crisis, right? For biodiversity, what do we do? The issue is that people normally, until now, don't value nature when they make investment decisions, right? When they set up a factory, right? They cut the trees, they introduce pollution through water, chemicals, and air pollution, for example, right? So what we need to do is really a few shifts, right? So that we can actually deal with the loss of biodiversity, but really also use our biodiversity resources for nature positive growth, right? Because you still have to grow, right? And you have to have jobs, right? You have the economic prosperity. What do? We needed to have a value shift to understand the nature differently, that nature has a value. Right? We needed to attach a value to it when we make investment decisions, right? So it's a value shift. And we have, again, a lot of work to do, right? To have systems of valuing nature, right? The second shift is our economic systems, right? And we needed to, for example, promote circular economy. We cannot just produce, use, and throw away, for example. We needed to reduce waste, right? And really reduce the throw away culture, right? And to create a circular economy so that we reuse, right, these materials. And there are a lot of details, right? But the key message is that we needed to have economic systems, right? Shift, right? So we move towards more circularity. And the other is our practice shift, right? Every day what we do, right? For example, when we talk about circular economy, right? That have impact on nature, plastics comes in, right? We must reduce or eliminate unnecessary single-use plastics, for example, right? And we must really seriously reduce food waste, because there's a lot of waste in how we consume our products, right? So we talk about the value shift, the economic system shift, and also practice shift, so that we can actually reduce the biodiversity loss, right, and achieve the goals of biodiversity that is called for in the convention and also the global biodiversity framework. Right? There are a lot of things we can do. Right? So this is a crucial moment, and UNEA is an opportunity for multilateralism to prevail, so that not only we have a country-level actions, but we have regional collaboration, also global collaboration, to achieve a sustainable world for us and for our future generations.
What are the main challenges that UNDP faces with regards to environment issues around the world?
Many developing countries face fiscal challenges, right? Because many developing countries are heavily indebted. Right? I came from Ethiopia before this trip. Their public debt level is already 50%. Kenya, for example, my understanding is that the public debt level has exceeded 75%. Right? It's a very high level of debt, and that squeezes public budgetary space, right, to invest in human development, in sustainable development. Right? You have a situation where, okay, the Minister of Environment, right, or Minister of Economy to say, okay, I need a certain budget, right, to reduce air pollution, to encourage nature investment in nature, right? But the finance minister is saying, okay, sorry, you cannot do it. I need this money to repay, for debt repayment, for interest payments, right? Education ministry, health ministry have the same problem. I have a problem I want to implement to improve people's health, right? Impact of climate on health. But the finance minister may say, okay, sorry, I want to support you, but I have an international obligation for debt repayment, for example. The issues of financing is an everyday challenge for a lot of developing countries. So what can we do, right, to address this through multilateral collaboration, right? Again, there are a lot of details, we don't have time, but this is one area of challenge, right? But the other one, for example, is technology, right? Technology. There are technologies that have been developed, right, in advanced economies, for example, right, to deal with a lot of challenges. For example, renewable energy, right, solutions, right? But many developing countries have challenges to access this technology, right? In Africa, for example, right, the majority of the world's population who do not have access to energy, clean energy, right, is in Africa, right? The technology is there, but they don't have the ability to access it, right? So that is partly linked to financing. It is also partly linked to the availability of existing technologies, right, to this population. So how do we overcome this, right? There are a lot of good practices, collaborations, but it's probably not at the scale that is necessary, right? And then the last question I wanted to mention is capacity. Capacity. We need indigenous capacity, right, to make use of this technology, but also maintain the technology, right? And create applications, and so that you can take advantage of for example, electricity, for health and for education outcomes, right? So there are a lot of challenges, but again, the way to solve this problem is really effective collaboration, right? And solidarity-based support.
Right. What specific programs or initiatives has UNDP implemented to support specific countries, especially the developing countries, in achieving their environmental goals as outlined by UNEA resolutions?
I think I want to see really more, consensus, right, of all stakeholders, not only governments, right, but really civil society organizations, the indigenous groups, stakeholders, right, young people, right, who are passionate about climate, biodiversity loss, and a lot of issues, because this issue affected their future, right? So I would like to see more consensus, right? On the not only the directions, but also the need for concrete actions, and also impact at scale, right? We need a scale, right, in order to really reduce to address the global challenges, right? So this is really what I would like to see. One thing I can focus on, for example, is what I mentioned earlier, how we're supporting governments to come up with more effective nationally determined contributions, right? Which is really their obligations to achieve Paris Agreement commitments, right? When you talk about NDCs, right, what do we mean, right? And what can UNDP do, right? And NDCs, right, is not only about emissions reduction, right? Emissions reduction is critical. It's the first thing that you need, right, to address climate challenge, right? But it is also about, for example, adaptation. Right? How do you use adaptation to address the impact of climate, right? So that the population is protected, right? Is not affected. But another aspect of NDCs, right? Many governments, their commitments is not about emissions, because they are not contributors. They are not major contributors. Their contributions from emissions are limited, very limited, right? But their NDCs focuses on participation, focus on the societal participation, right? The participation of women, youth, right, and other stakeholders, indigenous groups, for example, that how they can contribute to participate in climate action, for example, right? And also some governments focus on financing, right? They want to make sure that when they respond to climate challenges, certain levels of national financing, right, is allocated, right? So NDCs also include questions like financing, right? And so what UNDP does, right, with 120 countries in the second generation of NDCs, is to work with them, go through all the options they have, from mitigation, which is critical, right, to adaptation, to financing, to participation, so that the NDCs are quality NDCs, right, that have stronger chances of being implemented under the national leadership and the commitment, but with the support of the society. Right? So this is one example. So for the third generation, we're going to try to do the same, but with new developments of technology, right? New commitments, political commitments, because we've seen so much destructions as a result of climate events. Right? So there's a really renewed commitment. So one example I would focus on, for example, is really climate.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Hope it is useful. Yeah. Okay.